How to get out of jury duty. Hi, I'm Jeff Hampton with Hampton Criminal Defense Attorneys. It's happened to each and every one of us. We got that dreaded notice in the mail. You've received a summons for jury duty. Of course, everyone, the first thing that people ask me, I get this question probably multiple times a week. People will ask me on the street, they'll call me, they'll ask me the question, Jeff, how do I get out of jury duty? Let's discuss. By the way, one of the things I'm going to get into is I'm going to talk to you, number one, about the legal reasons, how to get out of jury duty, and number two, the practical reasons about what actually happens in court and what both sides are looking at to determine who a fair juror actually is for a criminal case. And let's start, number one, with the legal reasons for which you can be excluded from jury service. Now, number one, I'm going to spend a lot more time on this here in just a little while. Number one is that you are biased or prejudiced. Now, we'll get into that here in just a minute because most people don't just say they're biased or prejudiced, and we'll explain how that's determined. But let me go over a few things. Number one, let's look at the situations where you are not qualified to be a juror at all. One would be that you are, first understand this, unless you meet some of these requirements, you're always considered as a default qualified to serve as a juror unless you meet one of the specific provisions under the law saying otherwise. Now, what I'm going to do is spend a few minutes going under some provisions that exist in Texas law. Most states have similar provisions, but if you're from a different state, take a few minutes, do a quick Google search. You can find exactly what those requirements are. What are those exemptions? What are the requirements for you to be eligible for jury service? Okay, and these are the legal reasons why you can get out of it. So, for example, I'm going to go through some of the things you must be. Number one, you must be 18 years of age. You must be a United States citizen. You must be a resident of the state and the county for which you're being asked to show up and do jury service, okay? You must also be qualified to vote. You don't have to have actually voted at the last election. Voting is not a prerequisite. You just have to be qualified to be able to vote. You must be of good character. Now, some people say, what does that mean? Well, the best way to know that is if you're a convicted felon, you can't serve on a jury. If you're under current either indictment or investigation or received charges for theft, crimes of moral turpitude, that can also be a basis to exclude you from jury service. And if you must also not have recently served on a jury. So these are the things that are required. These are some of the basic requirements in order to be on a jury in Texas. Now, one of the easiest ways to get off or out of jury duty is through what's known as an exemption. Now, being exempt doesn't mean you can't volunteer and still show up, but if you don't want to have to show up, having an exemption means you can get off and not have to worry about it at all. Okay, so let's go through some of these. Number one, if you're over 70 years of age. If you're over 70 years of age, you don't even have to show up to this thing. You just let them know that you have an exemption and you're not going to be there. And so that can actually get you out of it. Number two, you have a young child under Texas law that is less than 12 years of age in your custody you are attending to, and showing up to court would cause an undue hardship, cause problems in order to be able to deal with child care. That can be a basis to also receive an exemption. And then number three, if you're a high school student. So if you're a high school student, you got to be in school, so you don't have to be on a jury. Number four is if you are enrolled in college. So there you go, bingo. If you're in college, you don't have to worry about being on a jury either. Number five, if you're a legislative employee working for the state. So if you're a state employee, you don't have to be involved in jury service. Number six is a primary caretaker of a disabled person. This is important. If you can show that you're the primary caretaker of someone who is disabled, that can also provide you exemption. And then if you are active duty military, but you must be on deployment. So if you're active duty military on deployment, you can also receive an exemption. And then finally, if you've had prior jury service within the last 24 months, that can also be a basis for an exemption. Okay, now I went over a few of the legal reasons why that you can be removed from consideration or exempt from jury duty. Let's talk about some of the practical reasons and what we mean by that. What actually happens when you get to jury duty? Well, listen. If your state's anything like Texas, particularly in the North Texas area where we represent individuals in the North Texas courts, criminal courts in Texas. I want to go over a couple of things that'll happen. You'll be asked to show up. You'll come to the jury services room. You'll get there and they'll assign you into kind of a seating area, and they'll call you over by number and assign you to a court. Now, one of the things that'll happen, and let me explain this to you. If it's a felony trial, you'll be assigned with a minimum of 60 other jurors into a criminal district courtroom, some courtroom that's a district court. And when you show up there, those 60 jurors, it's important to know what number you are. So when you get there, if you're number 1 through 20, there's a high probability you could end up on a jury because you're at the very front of the list. If you're like number 50 through 60 or something like that, like juror number 54 or 58, you don't have anything to worry about. The odds of you being on the jury are virtually zero. So it doesn't matter what you say or do. And there's a good chance that all of the attorneys and the judge are not going to ask you a single question the entire time you're there for the jury selection. Okay, so that's important. Now, what if it's a misdemeanor? If it's a misdemeanor, there's a good chance there's only going to be a jury pool of 20 jurors that are going to show up, and you only need 6 jurors for the actual jury. So if you're in the top 10, beware. There's a good chance, particularly in the top 10, there's a good chance you could end up being chosen, and you're going to get a lot of questions pelted at you by both the prosecutor and the defense attorney and potentially the judge. So I want to just give you kind of the rules of understanding. What your jury number is can determine your eligibility as to whether it looks like you might be up or in the firing line to make it on that jury. Okay. Now, here's the thing I want to spend quite a bit of time on. What I mentioned at the very beginning of this video, you can be eliminated from jury service because you are seen as biased or prejudiced. Now, I get asked this question all the time. What do I need to say to get eliminated from a jury if I'm on a criminal jury and I've showed up for criminal jury service? Now, I want to be real clear about this. If you are the one fighting for your life, okay, you want people showing up and being very serious about jury selection. So I always know that there's somebody that's going to make a comment on this video saying, this guy's trying to get people out of jury service. This is horrible. People should want to show up for a jury. Well, listen, that's by no means what I'm saying. I'm trying to help you understand, number one, when you have been called to show up for jury duty, it's really important that you speak up and you talk, because much, much worse than people not wanting to be on a jury are people that show up and don't participate in the jury service. And what I mean by that is if you show up and you just sit there and you don't say anything, imagine if you're the poor guy that's innocent sitting there in the seat of the accused and the people there are not interactive and they're not sharing how they really feel and what they believe about things. Listen, I've always believed that as a citizen, we owe it to the poor guy that's sitting over there accused that may very well be innocent, and in fact under our Constitution is to be presumed innocent. We owe it to that individual to share how we feel about things. If we have a prejudice about something or we're biased about something, we see things through a particular lens that might be concerning in terms of how we might judge someone, we owe it to that person to share exactly how we feel, so that way they can end up having a fair trial. Okay, so what I mean by that, it's never a good idea to make up something, both from a moral perspective as well as just flat out under the law. It's never a good idea to make up something to try to get off a jury. All you got to do is open your mouth. Tell people how you feel and what you think about things and what your beliefs are. Okay, so let's talk. How do we unpack this? Let's talk for a moment about how the lawyer is thinking when they ask you a question, what they're looking for, what exactly the judge has to hear in order to make a determination whether or not an individual is a fair juror. So you got to remember that the judge must hear that the individual is biased against either the state or the defense in order to strike them from the jury. And a lot of times people forget about this. The state or the government also has a right to a fair trial. So if someone says something that say, hey, I could never believe a cop. I've had a bad experience with a cop. Or I'll tell you right now, I don't believe anything that these cops say. I don't believe any. Well, if that's the mindset there, the state can actually make a petition to have that individual struck from the jury as well because of the bias that they have against them. Now, I want to talk about this for a second. Let's talk about how this all works. The attorneys in a jury trial during jury selection can strike you for 2 reasons. One is what is known as striking you for cause. In other words, that's having a juror removed for cause. And what does cause mean? That means they're unable to follow the law. They're unable or unwilling to follow the law. And so one of the best examples of this is you'll have some jurors who will just say, yeah, I get it. I know I'm supposed to give somebody the presumption of innocence, but I just can't do it. If he's sitting there and he was arrested by a police officer, I got to believe he did something wrong. And amazingly, there are people who say that. And as a result of that, they're off the jury because there's a presumption of innocence that's provided to us under the Constitution. So that's one reason. Another one is beyond a reasonable doubt. Some people say, well, you know what? I'm not I understand that's the highest burden in the land, but I'm not going to hold the state to prove the case beyond a reasonable doubt. As long as I feel like there's a chance it was done, I'm good with that. And so sometimes people will share information saying, I don't think that burden is I don't think that burden is what it should be. I think it should be lower, right? Well, you can't just change the law. You have to be willing to follow the law, and that individual can be struck for cause. Same thing with Fifth Amendment. We get this a lot about the right not to testify. People say, well, if I was innocent, I'll promise you right now, I'd get up there and testify no matter what. And even though an attorney can try to explain reasons why someone would choose not to testify, over and over again on every single jury that we've done, there's always a few jurors who say, doesn't matter, I would hold it against them. I know I'm not supposed to, but I would. And as a result of that, the judge will remove them for cause because they are not willing to follow the law. So that's one way, is to strike for cause. Number two is what's known as a peremptory challenge. And here you can have an attorney strike someone from the jury because they think you would not be reasonable or fair to their client. Now here it might be the defense attorney. Maybe the defense attorney would strike that juror because they would not be fair. They have a bias or a prejudice against their client. Or the state might do the same thing. They might say, I don't like their attitude. I don't like the way they're looking. They don't like me. There can be many reasons why that's the case. Now there are certain things that you cannot just strike people for. There was a case known as the Batson case, which basically says you can't just strike African American individuals just because you decide that you think that they would not be fair because of their skin, their race, their, whether it's their color, their creed, these are the type of things that are very clear delineations that you cannot just strike people for that reason. But otherwise, if you have a problem with someone, let's say someone's got a bad attitude, maybe they're just really rude or negative towards the accused, and I've seen this many times, and I've shared this on previous videos, where you'll just see people staring at the accused like this, like, I don't know, that guy, he's a sketchy guy. I don't believe anything that he says, I'll tell you that right now. Or you can see some people saying, Mr. Prosecutor, you can open your mouth and say what you want, but I'll tell you right now, I know how you guys work. You're all crooks. Everybody here, you don't even know, you've not even done an investigation. We've seen some of that take place. So in that situation, you can have it, some people believe that all cops tell the truth. Some people believe cops never tell the truth. Well, those can be reasons to peremptory challenge someone, to basically have them removed from the jury because of a prejudice or bias, because they're not fair. They're not going to be open-minded. Another reason why is what sometimes people say, I don't know any reason why someone would refuse a search. They should always consent to search. I can't ever even imagine a reason why someone wouldn't consent to a search. Other people say, I have no idea why you would ever agree to let a cop, search anything related to what you got going on. Obviously, those are two very different polar opposites. These are just some examples of reasons why a juror can be struck as a peremptory challenge. Now, why do I say that? Use some common sense on this, okay? The very best way, if you want to be removed from jury service, if you want to get off of a jury, get out of jury duty and get out of having to show up to actually be on a jury, one of the best things you can do is start talking. Speak up. The more you share your opinions, the more you let people know what you really think, the more you have plenty to say about everything that comes up during that jury selection, the better the chance someone is not going to like what you're saying. And I can guarantee you that. One side's not going to like what you say. And as a result of that, at the end of the day, the goal is what? Not for you to get out of jury duty, but the main goal is to make sure, the judge is supposed to make sure that the jurors that are remaining for that jury service are going to be fair and impartial and render a fair verdict based upon being a jury of the peers of the individual who's been accused. And look, the only way that happens is if the attorneys do a good job asking the right questions, and if the jurors are transparent and honest about how they believe and what they really think. So that's the best way to get out of jury duty, and it also happens to be the best way to give someone a fair trial. All right, listen, I hope this was of help to you. Wanted to just put together this video because I get this question all the time. If you or a loved one have been charged with a crime in the North Texas area, we at Hampton Criminal Defense Attorneys would be happy to provide you a free consultation. Don't hesitate to call the number that's above me on the screen here. We'll be able to go over anything that you need related to your case. Thanks for joining us here today. See you on our next video.